Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Japan and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never reviewed anything from before. So these guys are a very interesting company. They made their reputation as a beer venue actually, and in recent years they've expanded into brewing and their beers are supposed to be very nice. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't tried from them before. It's also part of a special series that they do, which I think will be interesting to explore further, and it's also quite suitable for the season that we're in actually. But I've heard good things about this beer, so needless to say, I'm very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to stick to Osaka, where I am just now, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Craft Beer Base. So this particular beer comes from their Emperor series. This was the first release within that series from what I understand. It's called Pyotr the First, or Peter the First, named after Peter the Great, of course, the Russian Tsar, but it comes in at 10% ABV, and this one, as you might expect, is a Russian Imperial Stout. Now, from what I understand, there have been a few different versions of this beer. The Untappd page that I found mentioned one that was 11.3% ABV, but like I said, this one is only 10%. So yeah, it should still be quite interesting. 10% of course is a good mark for a Russian Imperial Stout. So yeah, let's just crack on and see what this one has in store for us. But this will be my last review in Japan for the moment, and it's also going to be the Christmas Day review on the channel, which is kind of interesting. That was just how the sort of planning worked out. So yeah, Merry Christmas to you guys watching the channel. I hope you have a great time with your friends and family, and I hope you drink some nice craft beers. And it's been great to have your support over 2022, and we should have some more interesting things coming up for you across 2023, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, Merry Christmas. Let's crack on and see what this beer has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Craft Beer Base. This is the first time I'm reviewing one of their beers. I have tried one or two before though, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is hugely appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on a country, city, county, state, province, prefecture, whatever it is that takes your fancy. Put your local place into the search bar, and if I've reviewed beers from there, they should pop up. Otherwise, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and you'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with many others. And we will be reviewing more Japanese beers later in the year. There are a number of new breweries that I do need to check out. So yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Craft Beer Base. Still getting over this thing with my throat, which is quite annoying. But yeah, anyway, Craft Beer Base are based in Osaka, as I mentioned before, and the company was apparently founded back in 2012 by Tani Ai. So she originally studied business and marketing at Kagawa University, and she's also a qualified beer taster who studied with the Japan Beer Association. But over the years, she also has learned about brewing. She's done a bit of, she did home brewing. She started learning professionally as well, and now of course she's a brewer. But she says that she was inspired to open up the original craft beer base because a number of the mainstays of the Osaka craft beer scene had kind of gone out of business, and so she wanted to make a new home for the city's beer culture. So the original craft beer base was a little bar that was found close to Osaka Umeda station, and she gradually expanded this over the years. So the expansions included quite a few new venues. They had Branch, which is a standing bar where she sold her own beers as well that she brewed. There was Bud, which is a tap room in Osaka Station. Garden, a small brewery with a tap room and also a beer garden. And then they had the Seed, which was a small kind of beer shop stand thing that they had in the Hanshin department store, one of Osaka's biggest department stores. These days, though, it's only a couple of the venues that are still going. So they have Bud and Branch out of the original ones, but they now have a brand new facility called Mother Tree, which is close to the original site, just to the west of Umeda Station. This opened apparently in October of 2021. It's the new main base of operations, and it's got 15 taps and a brewery that you can see through the glass. We will do an out and about video there at some point in the fairly near future, of course. I do want to go and visit that place with Nevitt of Japanese craft beer reviews. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of interesting things going on with craft beer base at the moment. They've produced a lot of different beers. Their facility looks pretty impressive, I have to say. But as of December 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 155 different kinds of beer. There's a whole host of different styles in there. Lagers, IPAs, pale ales, darker malty things like this. But yeah, they've also got a good selection of beers that you can buy to take away, and quite an interesting cellar room as well, which is worth checking out if you get the chance. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Craft Beer Base for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on the usual social media, or of course you can check out the Untappd page and learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's everything about the brewery. Let's get on and have a little look at the beer itself. So like I mentioned to you earlier, this one is a 10% Imperial Stout. You can see the artwork on this one is pretty damn nice, I have to say. I do quite like that, and you can see it has the craft beer base thing at the top here, and then also the bottle cap as well, but that sticker is covering the bottle cap. We might be able to get that off though, but we'll see. But yeah, 10% ABV this one. I can't remember what I paid for this. This wasn't madly expensive. I want to say this was maybe like 800 or 900 yen, so that is about $9 American. Maybe about €8 and like £7.50 sterling or something like that, maybe £7. So yeah, as I say, my first beer from Craft Beer Base that I'm reviewing for you here on the channel. A nice place to round off this trip to Japan, but 10% Russian Imperial Stout. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. It is of course named after Peter the Great, who was the Russian Tsar. I think it was the, I wrote the years down actually, 1682 to 1725, and he was the one who was kind of known for bringing Russia into the modern era. So yeah, let's just see if we can get the sticky bit off this, and you can have a look at the cap as well. Yeah, so cap is this one. There you see. Quite interesting. So let's get the beer out into the glass and see what we have then. Very, very curious to see what we're going to get. Nice big 10% Russian Imperial Stout. Very nice for a winter's evening, although in Osaka the winter's pretty damn mild, to be honest with you. It's about 10-12 degrees here most days. So yeah, this does look pretty good, I have to say. So as you can see, and as you might expect, this beer has poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. But before the head disappears, I think we can safely say this beer has poured with a nice half finger of a frothy, I would say medium tan head. There you can see that. There's some smaller bubbles in there, a few bigger ones as well. But yeah, it does look like a pretty nice head, and it seems to be maintaining quite well, but I do expect that to fade away, be a kind of thinner and more foamy layer. But yeah, lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. If we shine the light through it, you can see that it's got a little touch of a sort of chestnutty mahogany edge to it. But yeah, this one is pretty much black as night. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort bottle is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in can affect the colour of it too. But when it comes to Imperial Stouts or any kind of black coloured beer, be it porter, stout, tmave, schwarzbier, whatever, it's quite difficult to actually change the colour in that manner. But yeah, in terms of what you'd expect from a Russian Imperial Stout, appearance-wise, nothing untoward with this one. A little bit of a kind of haziness to it. I guess it's just kind of unfiltered, but of course when it's this dark, you're not going to see that much through it, of course, anyway. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the appearance. Let's go on and have a wee look at the aroma and see what we get out of this beer. Oh yeah, this is quite interesting. So, of course, one of the really famous Imperial Stouts in the Japanese craft beer scene is the one from Mino Beer, just in the northern part of Osaka. So this beer actually does have a good little bit of a reputation to, or it has a good benchmark to try and match, actually, we should say. But I'm going to say straight away, This one is a properly old school Russian Imperial Stout. It's got a nice kind of roasty, toasty character to it. You do get a little bit of malty complexity. You can smell a wee bit of hop and a wee bit of fruit in this one. It doesn't actually say when it was bottled. I'm not sure. There is a date on the back here, which is the 3rd of October 2022. I'm not sure if that is a best before date or if it's a bottle date, but still, yeah. It's an Imperial Stout at 10% EBV. I don't think it's going to really go out of date. It's kind of impossible, to be honest. But yeah, this one does smell pretty nice. But let's break it down and describe the aroma a wee bit more in depth. Yeah. So the backbone of this beer is obviously the really roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. I like how that goes together. Yeah, so nice bit of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust in there. There are one or two little woody and kind of slightly nutty aromas mixing in with that. But above that, you've got this lovely kind of oily, rye bready quality coming out of the beer. So that does form, pardon me, that does form a good little bit of the backbone of this beer. That roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, the nutty, woody character, and then this like really oily, almost like German rye bready type quality. But yeah, on top of that, you can absolutely get a little bit of chocolate out of this one. And the chocolate in this beer for me, it's really more of a kind of high cocoa chocolate, this one, a high percentage cocoa chocolate, you know, sort of 70-ish, 80% cocoa. So yeah, the way this beer goes together in that regard is quite nice. It is really old school, this one. The chocolatey notes have a little bit of dryness to them, but you can also smell that sort of just oily sweetness. But yeah, there's also a little bit of a kind of tobacco-y smell to this one, like, you know, rolling tobacco. Definitely has a little bit of that going on. Played around with that many times in the lab when we were studying chemistry. Can learn a lot from tobacco, definitely. But yeah, on top of that, as I say, there's a little bit of brown sugar to this beer, and for me the brown sugars are quite interesting. You do get a little bit of that sort of highly caramelized sort of treacle molasses sort of thing. There's a little bit of a leathery character to this one as well, which indicates a slightly longer wort boil in my experience. So yeah, a little bit of leathery brown sugar, some nice treacle molasses, then you've also got that you've also got a little bit of a sweet kind of just a sweet straight up caramel in there too. There are one or two little biscuity elements, like a bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity quality to the beer. And yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, aroma wise, this beer gets a thumbs up from me. On the malty side of things, yeah, definitely quite old school, this one, but you can smell it's got a little bit of that. It is on the bready side of the spectrum from what you'd normally get with a Russian Imperial Stout. I don't think it's had a madly long wort boil, but yeah, I do get the impression slightly longer than 6 hours. And yeah, as I say, it's one of the more kind of bready Russian Imperial Stouts that I've come across. Let's go on to the hoppy and fruity side of the beer then. So, on the hoppy side of things, there's a good little touch of earthiness in there for sure. Also a little bit of floral character and a wee bit of grassiness. And remember, the Imperial Stout is not the most hop forward style of beer. It's quite often with these, the old school Russian Imperial Stouts, they would use a little bit of Bramling's Cross from England in them, and that always gives you it always gives you a little bit of red fruity character, but you also get this kind of floral and slightly earthy and herbal note. I get the feeling that this one is American hops. The 11.3% version used American hops. I want to say it was a bit of Chinook and Centennial that they were using in that one. I'm not sure if that's the case with this beer. I couldn't find the page with the 10% one. But yeah, it's quite... I get the impression that this is more American hops, and the main reason for that would be the way that the floral character is. It just smells a bit more kind of deep and American in that sense. So yeah, definitely a little bit of earthiness from the hops, a little touch of herbal character, but I do also get a little bit of kind of piney resin and a little bit of spicy floral aromaticity. There's also some nice grassiness to this one as well, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, this beer, it does get a thumbs up from me. I do like how it goes together. So yeah, the hoppy side of things, works in well. That little bit of kind of piney resin and sort of spicy floral aromaticity works well with the roasty toasty backbone. Let's look at the fruity side of the beer then. So the fruity side of the beer is, for me, the fruity side of the beer for me is quite, it's got a mix of things. It's actually quite sharp in some ways. There's a little bit of a raisiny character to it. You've also got a little bit of juicy plum in there, and you also have a little bit of the more kind of dried fruity character as well. There's a bit of raisin, plum, prune, but you've also got some nice figgy notes in there and a little bit of a blackberry too. So the fruity side of this one does have a little bit of depth to it and a wee bit of dryness as well. The more that you smell of this beer, the more the kind of fruity dryness you get. But like I say, overall, it is a really nicely done beer for me, and it gets my thumbs up. Proper old school Russian Imperial Stout when it comes to the aroma. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in. That's always half the experience with craft beer, from all the reviews that I've done. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one then and see what we have. So yeah, this is the Pyotr the First, Peter the First, named after Peter the Great, the pardon me, the Russian Tsar, part of the Emperor series from Craft Beer based here in Osaka in Japan. 10% Russian Imperial Stout. Let's give this one a taste and see what we have. Slàinte, skål, cheers, kampai, and Merry Christmas. Let's do this. Yeah, that is pretty nice, I have to say. Yeah, proper old school Russian Imperial Stout, this one. The first impression of it is that it's definitely, as I said, it's on the bready end of the spectrum for a Russian Imperial Stout, but it's also, it's also like quite roasty and toasty in that sense. This one does have a good little bit of IBU to it, which, to be honest, I would say you want from this particular style. Has got a little bit of fruitiness. It has still got a little bit of hoppy character. Of course, the longer that you age one of these beers, the less hoppy character you're going to get. But yeah, I think this one does go together quite nicely, actually. So yeah, gets a thumbs up from me. Let's go through this beer though and break the flavour down and just describe it that wee bit more in depth for you. But I will also say this beer does get a wee bit sweeter once your palate adjusts to it, so be aware of that too. But yeah, break the beer down as we always do. So yeah, middle third of your palate then. You've got a nice little bit of a, you have got a nice little bit of a roasty, toasty, well-fired, bread-crusty backbone to this one, which I think any good Russian Imperial Stout should have that. So yeah, nice little bit of roasty, toasty, well-fired backbone in there. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, there is a little touch of a more kind of woody note coming out of it. Definitely, it has got a little bit of a woody backbone. There's a little touch of nuttiness on top of there as well, and then above that, you do get more of a kind of rye bready bread crust. Above the well-fired bread crust, there is definitely more of a kind of sweet rye bready note, and there's also that more, there is also a little bit of that more kind of just straight up sweet rye bready character. So yeah, I like how that goes together. So on top of the rye bready notes, this beer does show a little bit more. You've got a bit more of a kind of sweeter wholemeal bready layer above that too. This beer, it really is very layered in how the flavours come out. So yeah, roasty well-fired bread crust, a bit more of a kind of rye bread crust, rye bready layer, wholemeal brown bready layer, and then Above that, you're starting to get some of the kind of chocolatey notes. You do get a little touch of a kind of tobacco-y note out of this one, mixing in with the bread. So you absolutely have a little bit of that. I say that's kind of what I interpret it as. You know, I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. That's the thing. But yeah, I certainly quite like the aroma of the bag tobacco. But yeah, above the kind of wholemeal brown bready layer, you start to get the chocolate and the kind of cocoa notes out of this one. And you do have a little bit of a spectrum on that middle third of your palate. So you can feel that further back on that middle third of your palate, you get a more kind of, 90, a really heavy cocoa chocolate. It's almost a little bit charred as well. So you get a little bit of that kind of charred, 80-90% cocoa chocolate further back. And then as you move further forward toward the front of that middle third of your palate, I think it does mellow out a little bit, and you maybe end up at about 60% cocoa chocolate, so you can feel that kind of gradient across the middle third of your palate. So yeah. So yeah, the beer, as I said earlier, this beer really does sweeten up the more that you drink of it too. It does, when your palate adjusts to this, when you start to get all these kind of nice sweeter flavours coming out of it. So above the kind of the sort of chocolatey layer, you start to get the brown sugary notes. And the brown sugar is quite layered in this one too. You don't, I was picking up more leatheriness from the brown sugars in the aroma than I was in the than I do in the flavour, I should say. Brain is not working tonight, guys. So yeah, definitely a little bit more leatheriness to the brown sugars in the aroma of this beer than than in the flavour. But yet, certainly you can feel the brown sugars in this beer almost kind of sit in like a sort of cup. A little kind of, you've got this circle in the middle of that middle third of your palate, but it almost feels like it's a kind of bowl shape in a sense. So the very base of that bowl is quite the very base of that bowl is like a more leathery brown sugary sort of thing. You do get a little bit of that. Above that, you start to get the kind of treacle and molasses notes out of the beer, and then in the dead centre of the middle third of your palate, that's when you get the straight up sweet caramel, and of course that's the kind of boozy side of the beer showing its face. So yeah, there is definitely a little bit of a kind of sweet sweet caramel in the dead centre of your palate, as I say. Middle of your palate, dead sweet caramel. As you move further out from that, more oily treacle molasses and a bit of leathery note underneath it. And you actually do get a little bit of toastiness to the brown sugars in this beer as well. But like I said, all of that sits on top of the chocolatey layer, and this beer does actually get drier and more roasty the further into the aftertaste you go as well. So in some cases, the beer sweetens up the more that you drink of it. When the liquid's on your tongue, the beer sweetens up the more your palate adjusts to it. But yeah, the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, it shows you more of the kind of bitter, dry, roasty, toasty side of things. But yeah, I think the only other thing we can say about this middle third of your palate is that it starts to show a little touch of nutty flavour toward the front of that middle third of your palate too. So yeah, the way this beer goes about its business is pretty nice, I have to say. It's a really well done Russian Imperial Stout, this one, and definitely more old school. It gives you what you want from this style category, if you like. So let's go on to the back third of the palate then. So, border region between middle and back third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a bready build up with this one. It's kind of like a sweet brown bread, actually. It's a bit wholemealy but a bit rye, and it's has that little bit of sweetness there. But the base of the back third of your palate is once again that roasty, toasty, well fired bread crusty character. Above that, you get the more rye bready bread crust. Then you get the rye bread layer, which is of course a little bit more taller and more airy. Then you get the wholemeal brown bread, and yeah, those two layers are taller. Above all of that, you start to get some of the more yeasty flavours out of the beer, and I'd be curious to know what yeast they've actually used in this one, because like I say, it does seem like a very old school Russian Imperial Stout. Kind of reminds me a little bit, this beer actually reminds me a little bit of Sinebrikov, which is a Finnish Imperial, I think that's an Imperial Porter, that one if I remember rightly, but the flavour profile of this beer does actually remind me of that one. But yeah, above the kind of wholemeal brown bready layer on the back third of your palate, you've got a little bit of a more, you do have a little bit of a more kind of just airy, yeasty bread note out of this one. It is like a wholemeal brown bread, but it's got a little bit of woodiness to it, a little bit of kind of honeycomb and things. Yeah, a little bit of crackery character as well, in fairness. So yeah, you've got this airy, yeasty character just sitting above everything else on that back third of your palate. So definitely the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller, and then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, the flavour just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, I really like how I do really like how the malty side of this beer, and the middle and back third of your palate goes together. The malty and yeasty side of this beer is very true to the style, of course. But yeah, let's go on to the hoppy side of things then. So we'll start off in the back corners of the palate. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you have got that nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's a little touch herbal, and then as you move further forward, you can feel, you do get quite a little bit of floral aromaticity of this one, and maybe just a little touch of pine resin. I wouldn't be surprised if Chinook was used in this one, actually. I've seen this kind of behaviour, if you like, from Chinook hops in Russian Imperial Stouts before. So there is a wee bit of piney resin and a little bit of spicy floral aromaticity, but round the front curve of the tongue, you definitely have a wee bit of a more, you've got a little bit of a more kind of light, grassy and slightly zesty character coming out of this one. So yeah, way this beer goes together on the hoppy side of things, I think is pretty nice. So that's another thumbs up from me. Let's focus on the front third of the palate and the fruity side of the beer then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. Again, you've got that roasty, well-fired bread crust in there, but in the front, in that border region, it's more like a really roasty, toasty chocolate brownie. So yeah, you've got this kind of chocolate brownie type note coming out of this one. You've also got, you do also have a little bit of a, just, you know, it's almost like that kind of really highly caramelized brown sugar that you get on the edge of the pan. It's got a little bit of that kind of vibe going on, but the base of the front third of the palate is a little bit roasty and toasty and bread crusty, and you get a slightly more smooth kind of rye bready note on that front third of your palate too. Remember that generally speaking, more bitter and roasty flavours come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward. But then yeah, above these flavours we've just described, you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, fruity side of this beer does evolve over the time that you spend drinking this beer. I'm noticing with this glass actually that I tend to drink a little bit more quickly than I do with the tulip glass. I'll need to find where my tulip glass in Japan is actually, because I did have one from Mino beer with a little monkey on it. But yeah, anyway, the fruity side of this beer, when you take it in, yeah, when you take it in, you have a little bit of a kind of sharper, at the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit of a kind of sharper raisiny note, and then underneath that you get the juicy plums, but under all of that, you actually get a little touch of like sultana and a little bit of a more kind of pruny and datey quality, so you are getting some of those dry, fruity notes in there, but underneath there you start to get more of the kind of roasty, toasty malts coming out as well, which is interesting. So the fruity side of this beer isn't overly sweet and overly oily. It does have a little bit of roastiness pushing its way through. But yeah, as you move further forward on that middle, on that front third of your palate, sorry, you start to get a more kind of oily, figgy character out of it. And as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, you have a more kind of black curranty base. So yeah, a little bit of oily fig, a little bit of blackcurrant, and above that you've got that nice juicy blackberry coming out of the beer. So yeah, you've got a good balance in this beer on the fruity side of things between the sharper and sweeter fruits, but also the more kind of dry fruity characters as well. But the dry ones linger more into the aftertaste than the sweeter and juicier ones do. But yeah, as I say, flavour profile wise, it's quite an interesting Imperial Stout, this one, because the flavours come out in a slightly different way, but it does give you everything you would want from this style category. But yeah, let's round off this review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise, I would say that this beer, it's bottom end of full bodied for me. The carbonation is quite smooth. It does have a nice kind of oiliness to it, which you would want from this style. So yeah, nice little bit of oiliness too. A little bit of dryness out of it. But in terms of IBUs, I think this has got to be about 80 IBUs, something like that. But quite a bit of that's coming from the hop, but you're also getting quite a lot of it from the malt as well, which you do expect. But the malt base has roasty toastiness, dryness to it, also a bit of sweetness. Yeah, everything you want again. We've talked about the IBUs and the hops, the fruity side of this beer, a little bit of dry fruity character, but also some nice more rounded fruity notes coming out of it too. But like I said, I really like how this beer goes together, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, needless to say, quite impressed with this one. I think Craft Beer Base have done a good job of this, and we will need to try a few more beers in this Emperor series, and just a few of their other beers, generally speaking, too. So we'll do an out and about video at the Mother Tree the next time I'm in Japan. I think hopefully we can get Neva along and do that as well. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about this particular beer. I would say Pyotr the First. I'm trying to remember how you say one in Russian, I forget that. But as I said, this one was a 10% Russian Imperial Stout, really nicely done, and I think this was a nice way to round off my reviews here in Osaka this time. And yeah, a very good Christmas Day beer review too. So again, a Merry Christmas to you guys watching. Thank you for your support. As always, let me know your own thought on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Craft Beer Base as well, and do give me some other Japanese brewery recommendations and beer recommendations, and we'll see about setting those up the next time I make it out here, which should hopefully be about March or April, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, till the next time, Slange, Skull, cheers. This was the Peter the First, Pyotr 1, if you like, from the Emperor series at Craft Beer Base here in Osaka. Slange, Skull, cheers, and Kanpai.